Well, I'm joined now by Seth Schachner, who's the Managing Director of Strat Americas, which specialises in advising clients on media and technology partnerships. Seth, thanks very much for being with us. Scarlett Johansson is a huge name in Hollywood. What are the implications of this case?
Well, I mean, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. I mean, I think the big picture here is really about streaming and the future of streaming and how the studios really need to adjust to that. And I think the situation with talent, in particular Scarlett, because she's one of the biggest stars and is able to take a stance, is potentially very important. But at the end of the day, this is a picture that Disney financed and owned. It's one of their franchises, and they kind of adjusted their contracts several years back to give them flexibility to manage during this transition for COVID. So I think what you're likely to see is just more about the increasing prominence of day and date releasing for motion pictures, whether it's on theatrical screens or in people's homes through what's called premium video on demand. And that's in fact how Disney moved to release this picture. So I think there's a little bit of an effort on the part of the talent to try and stake a claim in the water and change talent compensation. And I think it's very important for the studios to consider that. But I think at the end of the day, streaming is going to continue to grow. And the comments I was just watching earlier about theaters, I think are important, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be the future of this business.
So you think that this is more than just a COVID blip, that actually we're going to see this roll out longer term?
There's no question that the pandemic, accelerated these changes. And if you're looking at a contract, and you're a lawyer, which is in essence what this news is actually all about, it's legal maneuvering. There's probably something called a force majeure clause that takes all bets off the table and allows people to try and renegotiate things. But I think the studios have really seen the future. And it is unquestionably about all you can eat at home access and trying to expand the audience for motion pictures in general. So I think this strategy will undoubtedly continue. And, we all hope that motion pictures will be in theaters because it's always been an important part of the process. But I think it's unquestionably a long-term trend for sure.
How much do you think stars like Scarlett Johansson are looking to the music industry and the impact that Spotify, for example, has had on earnings for musicians, and thinking we need to stop this happening in our business?
Well, that's a great point. I hope that they are. I came from the music industry, and I don't think our industry was as broadly positioned as Hollywood and the film and television industries are, with all of their ancillary markets to try and maneuver around the different levers to change compensation for them. So I think that in the short term, the streaming compensation for artists, particularly in music, has obviously been a much tougher challenge for them. But in the long term, when you open up some of these new channels, you not only bring about greater audiences, but you bring lots of different digital platforms that are out there. So right now in music, there are lots of other ways for artists to profit, whether it's social video or self-distribution platforms or games now. And I don't know if that exactly charts to the film industry, but I think you have to keep embracing these changes, and ultimately the compensation will be figured out as the market changes.
I mean, even before the pandemic, the lines between the big and the small screen were starting to be blurred, weren't they? We were seeing huge budgets for TV productions, Hollywood stars moving into TV. And you talked about the experience of sitting watching a movie in a theatre, but do you think the audiences now are thinking, well, I'm just as happy to watch these things at home. I'm used to seeing these big stars on my TV. It's changing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what's also changing is there's been a bunch of interesting, pretty old school Hollywood figures out here kind of acknowledging how just the very identity or definition of what you would call programming has changed. So, what is a motion picture, and how do you chart that against a social video production or something that an artist just creates? And so all of these things are presumably accessible, whether it's from a Netflix or a broadcaster or even just from your smart television set. So yeah, I think these patterns of consumption are completely changing, and the home is going to be very vital. When I look back at the motion picture industry, I'm for example personally an independent picture fan, and so I can't tell you how many theaters I've sat through where we're one of a very small minority of people actually sitting in the facility. So one could arguably say, gee, streaming has expanded the audience for independent pictures, and isn't the home a better vehicle for that? And maybe theaters have overexpanded a bit and need to adjust themselves for these big Hollywood tentpoles like this Marvel thing that is all over the news today. So, yeah, I definitely think it'll open up lots of different patterns of consumption, whether the pandemic's here or not.
Seth Schechner, fascinating to hear from you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.